After much time taken preparing the men and logistics for the task ahead, the South Africans were finally ready to renew their attack on FAPLA and hopefully drive the remaining brigades back across the Cuito River into Cuito Cuananavle. FAPLA's 21st Brigade was holding the northern portion of the defensive line, and they would bear the full brunt of a joint SADF UNITA attack on January the 13th. The SADF High Command had hoped that cloud cover and wet weather would prevent the MiGs from flying that day. The day dawned promisingly enough, and UNITA began the attack against 21st Brigade's northern outpost. FAPLA responded with fire from their heavy M46 howitzers. These guns were in turn engaged by counter-battery fire from the G5s. By noon, a large bushfire had broken out among the FAPLA positions as Force I took over the attack from UNITA. FAPLA's outer positions had been abandoned as the mechanized infantry attacked towards 21 Brigade's primary defensive line. The infantry were out of their rifles and into the enemy bunkers and trenches. They met stiff resistance. A group of 20 FAPLA kept on firing from their bunkers. Until an olifant drove up and destroyed the bunker and its occupants with a high explosive round at close range. The weather had cleared since the misty morning, and the MiGs from Manong soon made their presence felt. 21 Brigade called for reinforcements and air cover as they withdrew to their final reserve fortifications. The presence of the MiGs delayed the SADF UNITA forces from launching their final attack, as they were forced to seek cover in the thick bush. The attack was further delayed when 3 olifants threw off their tracks in the thick, loose sand of the Chambinga Heights. The tanks were recovered as the rest of the force pushed ahead, determined to maintain the initiative. The 16th Brigade, however, had used the air cover provided by the MiGs to send a tank squadron to aid and reinforce their beleaguered 21 Brigade comrades. The MiGs kept up the pressure against the SADF, with an airstrike lightly damaging an olifant just before dusk. In spite of the failing light, the SADF moved towards the final FAPLA defensive positions. These consisted of a series of well-laid out bunker complexes, crisscrossed with trenches and strewn with well-laid mines. 23mm had also once again been dug in defensively, and they offered stubborn resistance. Olifants and rifles ploughed through the anti-personnel minefields to clear a path for the following infantry. They also knocked out numerous FAPLA vehicles, tearing holes in the FAPLA defences. FAPLA tanks launched a counterattack from the right flank. They were spotted and soon shot out by the Olifants of the Pretoria Regiment. Desperate to stop the South African attack, a FAPLA BM-21 rocket launcher launched its full salvo of 40 rockets horizontally at the advancing tanks from less than 150 meters away. Driving through the massive explosions and flying debris, Staff Sergeant Spickles de Blanche destroyed the rocket launcher with a direct hit from his Olifants 105 gun. FAPLA resistance finally began to crumble, and the SADF began mopping up the enemy trenches. The remainder of 21 Brigade attempted to flee the battlefield to safety. They soon ran into the rifles of a 61 mech ambush, however. With the momentum clearly on their side, Colonel Fortier ordered Forsyth to continue fighting any remaining FAPLA units, using the light provided by illumination flares. The battle continued throughout the night, until eventually Forsyth and 61 mech were allowed to return to their nighttime lagers. The South Africans returned to 21 Brigade's positions the next morning to gather intelligence and count their spoils. After the battle of the 13th of January, 61 mech and 4 Psi left the battlefield and retired to their lagers, east of the Kwatia Source and east of the Chambinga Highlands respectively. Both units were in urgent need of mechanical repairs, and the tank squadron needed new tracks for its Olifants. As such, UNITA was left to hold the positions captured from FAPLA's 21 Brigade. 4 days after the battle, FAPLA launched a massive armoured counterattack against UNITA, with the aim of recapturing the positions vacated by 21 Brigade. This attack was successful, and FAPLA reoccupied their old positions by the 3rd week of January. One of the reasons the SADF had not been able to play a more active role in driving off FAPLA was the deadly toll hepatitis and malaria was having on its forces. Commandant Jan Malan of 4 Psi had to be evacuated after he contracted hepatitis, along with dozens of his men, including men from the tank squadron. After a failed UNITA attack on January the 19th, the South Africans had become convinced that the guerrillas were still not capable of taking or holding ground against conventional FAPLA forces. As such, Colonel Fortier, commanding 20 SA Brigade, recommended a sufficient logistics build-up to allow the momentum of future attacks to be maintained until all FAPLA defensive positions east of the Cuito could be overrun. At this time, the SADF was slowly beginning to lift the veil of secrecy surrounding their involvement in Angola.
East Angola in the Cubango province. The only transit for the retreating 21st and 25th FAPLA brigades.
Then of course one has a stalemate, an impasse. And out of that impasse might be born an agreement. But this is what we must probe, as I said, and investigate.
This coincided with the first tentative feelers sent out by the Cubans and Angolans to explore the possibility for a negotiated settlement to end the war in Angola. In a major breakthrough, Cuba and Angola accepted that all Cuban troops would have to withdraw from the country for peace to be achieved. The meeting between Chester Crocker of the US State Department, the South Africans, the Angolans and the Cubans were beginning to take on a more concrete nature, even though both sides were still escalating their military involvement and rhetoric. The shuttle diplomacy of Chester Crocker and the diplomats in late January 1988 was beginning to bear fruit, but the military men were just as eager to defeat their enemies and thereby strengthen their side's negotiating position in any future talks. As such, the largest conventional war in Africa would continue. FAPLA supply convoys travelling from Manong to Cuito Cuananavle came under heavy attack from South African mirages in early January. One attack destroyed 40 vehicles out of a convoy of 170. To counter this threat, FAPLA began deploying portable air defence systems to travel with and protect the precious convoys. As more Cuban planes and pilots entered the battlefield, they began flying airstrikes at night as well as during the day. Although these airstrikes were wildly inaccurate, the constant tension of hiding from the prowling MiGs and being helpless to fight back was beginning to wear on the morale of the South Africans. The Communists tried to encourage desertion by dropping pamphlets on suspected South African positions, but their efforts were laughably ineffective. In fact, the SADF was already working on a possible countermeasure to remedy the situation in the air. On the 9th of February, an air defence task force flew into Mavinga, consisting of 2 Cactus missile launcher vehicles, 6 captured 23mm guns, and SAM-17s. The Cactus missile launcher was developed from the French Crotale system in the 1970s. It had been designed to defend strategic targets like South African airfields. As such, it was not a system suited to heavy bundu bashing and difficult terrain. Nonetheless, the launcher and its radar were in position on the 13th of February to give protection to the South African attack planned for the next day. Only hours into their deployment, the Cactus radar detected 2 MiG-23s approaching their position. They had been spotted by FAPLA patrols, and the MiGs were heading into attack. A missile was fired without hitting the MiGs, but it drove them off and ensured that the enemy aircraft would fly at a higher altitude, where their accuracy was greatly reduced. The airbase at Manong, 170 kilometers away from Cuito Cuananavale, was a major thorn in the side of the upcoming South African attack. The dozens of MiGs could seriously disrupt the impetus of the armoured assault. Something would have to be done. It was then that the Falcon returned to brigade headquarters and hatched a plan for one of the most daring raids of the entire war. The 32 Battalion Raiders, making life hell for the FAPLA convoys, would go into the very belly of the beast. On the 7th of February came the Falcon's order to attack the airbase in the hours preceding the main armoured assault against the FAPLA brigades. The strike force of 4 Valkyrie rocket launchers and 4 Ratel 90s from the anti-tank squadron and supporting trucks and vehicles would move only at night, driving through some of the most remote country imaginable. 22:53, the first ripple of 96 rockets was fired at the aircraft hangars. After moving and reloading, another 96 rockets were unleashed at 12:30, after which the raiders withdrew. One aircraft was damaged, in addition to 7 Cuban and 73 Angolan Air Force personnel killed in the shelling. On Valentine's Day 1988, the full force of the SADF and their UNITA allies would attack FAPLA's fortified positions on the Chambinga Heights. With many SADF men incapacitated by hepatitis and malaria, including the commandants of both 61 Mech and 4 Psi, UNITA would take on the task of tackling 21 Brigade in their previous positions. Meanwhile, 4 Psi and 61 Mech would feint towards 21 Brigade before swinging south to assault 59 Brigade in what was hoped would be a surprise attack. The attack began in the early morning with the usual artillery bombardments. 4 MiGs appeared overhead at 9 o'clock, indicating that the shelling of Manong had not been as successful as had been hoped. However, the heavy South African movements in his sector convinced the brigade commander of 21 Brigade that his forces would be the main focus of the attack. The High Command at Cuito Cuananavle agreed with his assessment and ordered the artillery and air force to concentrate on protecting 21 Brigade. UNITA suffered some casualties, but in the confusion, both 4 Psi and 61 Mech bypassed 21 Brigade and infiltrated into the gap between 21 and 59 Brigades. The commander of 59 Brigade was now certain that the South Africans were about to attack his positions from the north, whilst the commander of 21 Brigade was convinced that the SADF were about to attack his positions from the south. In the confusion and in the thick bush of the area, the FAPLA High Command had no idea as to the true intentions of the South Africans, and their confusion was about to have deadly consequences. Whilst UNITA kept 21 Brigade busy, 61 Mech moved into a flanking position to cut off reinforcements, and 4 Psi moved south, coming in behind the fortified positions of 59 Brigade, heading straight for the brigade headquarters. With the Valentines leading the charge, 4 Psi broke into FAPLA's positions, where they were confronted by dug-in tanks and infantry. FAPLA put up fierce resistance, but the SADF assault was relentless. After a vicious 2-hour firefight, they had captured the brigade headquarters, which had been abandoned by 59 Brigade, and they had destroyed 4 tanks, whilst the remaining members of the brigade fled towards the Tampa Triangle. Having taken over the defense of Cuito Cuananavle, the Cubans were not going to sit back whilst their outlying positions crumbled. The 3rd Tank Battalion, a joint Cuban-FAPLA force with mixed crews, was ordered to drive the South Africans back in a massive armoured counterattack. After linking up with elements of 25 Brigade, the 3rd Tank Battalion headed straight for 61 Mech's positions on the flank. Commandant Skuman had time to call up the Olifants as the armoured forces engaged each other in the thick bush. With visibility at no more than 10 meters, the tank who shot first would survive. The engagement, 7 FAPLA tanks had been destroyed for no SADF losses. Things did not go as well for the mechanized infantry, however, who were pursuing the remains of 59 Brigade as they fled into the Tampa Triangle. The dreaded 23mm guns had been dug in and were covering the FAPLA withdrawal. A burst of the armor-piercing cannon shells shredded a rattle of 61 Mech, instantly killing 4 South African soldiers, 2 of whom were cousins. The remaining crewmen were seriously wounded. As night fell, 4 SAI linked up with 61 Mech, and they cleared the remaining FAPLA from the Chambinga Highlands.